He left her for her sister. The whispers spread through the grand cathedral like wildfire. Guests turned to each other with wide eyes, mouths hanging open, shocked by the scandal written into this wedding. At the altar stood Richard Millionaire, powerful, arrogant, and beside him, not his wife, but her younger sister, Clara. But what no one expected was that the woman Richard abandoned would walk back into his life at the very moment he thought he had won. Eliza had loved Richard before. The world knew his name. When he was just a man with a dream, she was there cooking late dinners when he worked into the night, patching his worn suits, believing in him when banks turned him away. Together, they built an empire brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. But as the empire grew, so did Richard's pride. Success filled his pockets, but arrogance filled his heart. He stopped seeing Eliza as his partner and began to see her as a shadow of his past. And then came the betrayal. Richard didn't just betray his vows, he betrayed blood. He left Eliza for Clara, her sister, a woman she trusted, a woman she had defended countless times at family dinners. The wound was deeper than infidelity. It was treachery carved into her very family tree. The world expected Eliza to crumble. Friends whispered that she would disappear in shame. Papers speculated she'd be left with nothing, forgotten, erased. But Eliza was not the kind of woman who broke quietly. For months, she vanished from the spotlight. While Richard flaunted his new romance with Clara, Eliza poured herself into the business she had quietly nurtured. What began as a small side project bloomed into something far greater. She struck deals, expanded branches, and made bold moves. Her name began to appear in financial journals, not as the scorned wife, but as a visionary leader, and in her silence, she carried a secret. 5 of them, quintuplets, children born from the marriage Richard had so carelessly abandoned. Eliza chose not to tell him. She chose instead to raise them with love, away from betrayal, far from his poisoned arrogance. Every late night feeding, every small laugh, every tiny hand clutching hers, those children became her strength, her reason, her revenge. The wedding day arrived like a spectacle. The cathedral sparkled with crystal chandeliers. Guests dripped in diamonds and emeralds. Photographers snapped as Richard stood tall in his designer suit, smug and certain. Clara, draped in silk, smiled nervously, her hands shaking despite the jewels on her fingers. But just as the music swelled, a sound roared. Outside, an engine, loud, thunderous, golden. Heads turned. Guests pressed to the windows. And then they saw it, a golden Ferrari sliding to a stop, gleaming like fire in the sun. The doors opened. Out stepped Eliza. She wore a gown more brilliant than the bride's, her hair shining, her presence commanding every eye in the room. Cameras flashed, guests gasped, and whispers rose to shouts. But the true shock came next. From the Ferrari stepped 5 small children, quintuplets, dressed immaculately, walking hand in hand with their mother. The church erupted. Some gasped, others clutched their pearls, and a few even applauded, unable to contain their awe. Clara's smile shattered, replaced by horror. Richard's arrogance drained from his face like color from a dying flame. Eliza walked down the aisle. Slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. The children followed, their small faces glowing with innocence, unaware of the storm their very existence unleashed. When she reached the front, she did not shout. She did not cry. Her voice was calm, steady, sharp as a blade. Richard, while you chased vanity, I built an empire. While you sought comfort in betrayal, I carried your legacy alone. Meet your children, the quintuplets you abandoned before you. Even knew they existed. The words struck harder than any blow. Clara gasped, staggering back. Richard's hands trembled, his lips parted, but no words came. Eliza turned to the guests, her voice rising, strong and unshakable. Money fades. Looks fade. But loyalty and respect, that is real wealth. Betrayal may break a marriage, but it cannot break a woman who knows her worth. The cathedral was silent for a moment, heavy with the weight of her words. And then applause. First from one guest, then another, until the entire hall rose to their feet. Not for Richard, not for Clara, but for Eliza, the woman who turned her pain into power, who turned betrayal into triumph. She left as she came, walking with her head high, her 5 children at her side, the golden Ferrari weighing like a chariot of victory. Richard and Clara stood frozen, humiliated, left with nothing but whispers and shame, and as the doors closed behind her, the truth. Rain-clear Eliza was no longer the woman he left behind. She was the woman he could never reach again.